It's a real pleasure for me to be here today for this presentation with LDS Family Services. I'm Rod Jeppsen, and I am new to this profession, you might say. About 25 years ago, I started a career in the stock brokerage training business. Quite a far cry from doing clinical work in the mental health industry, although some of those people need mental health counseling as well. But one of the things I learned from the 25 years of teaching the people how to pass the stockbroker's exam are things that I think can be helpful in the mental health profession. For example, we had a 4-day seminar where we would train people to learn everything they needed to know in order to pass the National Stockbrokers exam. So our students would include people who had never been in the financial services industry. They had graduated perhaps in a totally different area. They might be coming from the construction field. They might be coming from the nursing profession. They could even be coming from the mental health profession. But they come to our seminar, and our job is to teach them what they need to know in order to pass the exam the first time. So our reputation, our business was built on how many of my employees will pass if I send them to your school the first time. So passing rates like 80%, 90% were very impressive. That wasn't always the case. So one of the things we needed to do in our 4-day seminar was to be able to teach principles in a short, concise manner. And most of the time we use graphics, visuals, because the saying that says a picture speaks 1,000 words is so very true, particularly when people are learning a topic for the first time. So when I started into the mental health profession a few years ago, I said to myself, how can I take these therapeutic principles, these concepts, these tools that have proven to be successful, and put them in picture format so my client might be able to remember them. Most of my clients are clients who struggle with compulsive sexual behaviors, pornography addiction, and other similar types of sexual addictions. So for them, most of them are viewing pictures. They view pictures because that's their learning style. In other words, they're not listening to audio tapes, they're not reading sexually explicit novels or things like that. They're looking at pictures. And so I wanted to be able to present the material in a format that they are accustomed to and have them retain it. My thought was, if they can't retain what they learned from therapy, how are they going to be able to apply it after they leave therapy? If they're in therapy for a few months, they learn something while they're here, where do they go after they leave therapy? Would a picture help them to remember some of the therapeutic things that they learned during therapy? While I served as a bishop, one of the interesting things was this. I sent ward members to clients, to therapists rather, to be clients, and I wanted to check on them from time to time. So during our interviews, I would say something like this: tell me how counseling is going for you. And quite often the response would be, actually, it's going very well. What does very well actually mean? And then there was kind of a pause. I waited for a moment, and I would say something like this: can you share with me just one thing that you've learned so far in your treatment, in your therapy? And then there would be another pause. Now, I don't believe that the therapist was not qualified at all, nor do I believe that the client, my ward member, did not understand. But what I do believe is it may have been presented in a way that the ward member was not able to retain it. I realized I had put the ward member on the spot by asking him about how his treatment was going, but at the same time, I expected to have some answer rather than a pause. So I have tried to put together some pictures that have been effective for my clients. I'm not sure exactly how that worked for your clients. That will be up for you to decide. But we're going to go through a few visuals here, and I'm going to explain how I would use this visual with my client, what I would say as they're looking at the picture, what kind of a question I might pose at that moment in time. So let's begin first with a scripture out of the Book of Mormon. This is out of 1 Nephi chapter 3. Let's take a look at this scripture. And we cast lots, who of us should go in unto the house of Laban. And it came to pass that the lot fell upon Laman. And Laman went in unto the house of Laban, and he talked with him as he sat in his house. Now that was the first attempt that Nephi and his brothers made to get the brass plates. Now it's interesting to me, as we take a look at that scripture, that he went into Laban's house and talked with him. Now, as I look at my clients who have struggled many times to overcome sexual addiction, they have had numerous attempts to overcome it and tried and tried and tried, and quite often have become very discouraged. So I look at this first attempt and I apply it to changing humans' behavior. Quite often we use the method as Nephi and his brothers did. Let's just go in and talk about it. Let's just go in and convince him with words, with intellect, that we need the plates. And this was unsuccessful. The second attempt, the next scripture, is in 1 Nephi chapter 3, verse 24. And it came to pass that we went in unto Laban and desired him that he would give unto us the records which were engraven upon the plates of brass, for which we would give unto him our gold and our silver and all our precious things. 1 Nephi chapter 3, verse 24. So the second attempt for Nephi and his brothers were to use what I call bargaining. We cut a deal with God. If you'll take away this behavior, I'll be faithful the rest of my life. I'll be a dedicated home teacher. I'll be a dedicated father. I'll be a dedicated grandfather. I will serve thee the rest of my life if you will take away this addiction. And so, like Nephi and his brothers, it was very interesting what they proposed. Their proposal was this: give us the plates of brass, and we will give you our riches. It wasn't the other way around. Here's our riches. We would now like to have the plates of brass. So bargaining is a common method that I find my clients have used in order to get out of the addiction. Let's take a look at the third attempt and see some of the things that were different in this third attempt from the first and second attempts. The third attempt: and it came to pass that I spake unto my brethren, saying, let us go up again unto Jerusalem, and let us be faithful in keeping the commandments of the Lord. For behold, he is mightier than all the earth. Then why not mightier than Laban and his 50, yea, or even than his tens of thousands? Therefore, let us go up. Let us be strong, like unto Moses. For he truly spake unto the waters of the Red Sea, and they divided hither and thither, and our fathers came through out of captivity on dry ground, and the armies of Pharaoh did follow, and were drowned in the waters of the Red Sea. What was different about this third attempt? To me, there was something very, very interesting. Nephi's brothers wanted to leave. They didn't want to try again. But Nephi got a visual image in his mind of someone else who had not been successful or who was in the middle of turmoil, and that was Moses. And he visualized in his mind Moses standing at the Red Sea and the Red Sea parting and Pharaoh and his armies being drowned in the Red Sea. And with that visual image in his mind, he said, we can go back again. Using our intellect, bargaining with God, Here he got a visual image of someone who pressed forward even after 2 failures. What was unique now about this third attempt and this visual that Nephi had created? Let's take a look. Now behold, ye know that this is true, and ye also know that an angel has spoken unto you. Wherefore can ye doubt? Let us go up. The Lord is able to deliver us, even as our fathers, and to destroy Laban, even as the Egyptians. So Nephi had this perfect vision that the Lord would intervene, and the visual he used was Moses and the predicament that Moses was in, and how that visual image gave him the courage to move forward. And now an often quoted scripture in 1 Nephi 4, verse 6, and I was led by the Spirit, not knowing beforehand the things which I should do. So Nephi says he did not know beforehand what he should do, but he was led by the Spirit. And ultimately, our clients need to be led by the Spirit on what they need to do in order to get out of the behavior. So let's begin now. I start with that story out of the Book of Mormon to prove the value of a visual image in someone's mind. So let's suppose I have a husband and wife to meet with me, and this is their first visit. The wife is concerned about her husband and what he's been involved with. Quite often, the wife is very distraught. One of the things I want to approach the wife about on the first session, or maybe the second or third session, as early as it seems reasonable, is to talk about the possibility of a lapse and how we can deal with the lapse in a much more healthy way. By this I mean, I want to put this wife in a situation with something she can remember. I want to create in her mind a visual, something that she can remember in order to turn to in the very hour of need, just like Nephi did. So the visual that I use is a visual of a fire truck. This fire truck, I show the client a picture, and I say to the wife, "Can I ask you a few questions?" "Certainly." Let's think back when you were in elementary school and there was a fire drill. Walk through with me, the best that you can recall, what actually happened during those fire drills. And the response is usually something like this. Well, the teachers would get us all together. We would go out of the room in single file. We would walk down the hall in single file, go outside the building. Once we were outside the building, we accounted for every student. We did a roll call. And that's kind of what I remember from the fire drill. Very good. Why do you suppose the elementary school took time to go through a fire drill? What was the benefit, do you think? Well, probably so we'd be a lot calmer, a lot more relaxed if there were ever a fire. I think that's probably exactly right. Do you think they were planning to have a fire, or were they planning for a fire? Well, what do you mean? Do you think they were actually planning to have a fire next Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock? Or do you think they were planning for a fire to be prepared in case one ever happened? Well, they were planning for a fire. Does this give an arsonist the right to go in now and start a fire at the school? Well, absolutely not. So let's look at this just for a moment. You're aware that your husband has had several lapses. Lapses are not good. But what can we do today to talk openly about a lapse? You each have some note paper. How would you like your husband to handle a lapse? Would you like him to tell you about it? Yes, I would. How soon would you like him to tell you about it? Within the next day, 2 days, immediately thereafter? Would you like to have him tell you face to face? Would you like it to be by phone? Would you like it to be by email? Tell me what would work for you. Well, I don't want my husband ever to have a lapse again. I understand that. I understand that. And that would be wonderful if that were the case. But just like we don't want a fire to occur at the elementary school, we need to plan for one. And just because we're talking about this, it does not give the arsonist the right to go start a fire. This does not give your husband the right to go and lapse. But let's talk about it. The end result is, if one happened, we hope that you can be calmer, that he can be calmer, that you can talk through it, that you can walk through it, and maybe be able to handle it differently than you have in the past. So that's the first visual, a fire truck. The second visual is just 2 words, surrender prayer. So while I'm working with the husband, one of the things I want to try to accomplish is to get him to view womanhood differently than he does. By that I mean he sees a woman and immediately he sees sexuality. He doesn't see a person, he sees an object, and that's why we call it sexual addiction. We're talking about seeing a woman and immediately he's thinking self-gratification, to the point that he's not able to look at her as a human being, as a child of God, with feelings, with values, with goals, with children, or whatever her circumstances might be in life. So the surrender prayer I teach my clients goes something like this. When you see a woman and you find yourself being attracted to her, say something like this: Heavenly Father, there's one of thy daughters. She is beautiful. She is gorgeous. She has feelings. She has emotions. She has days when she cries. She has days when she's lonely. She has days when she is sad. May I respect her, Father, as one of thy daughters, and may she find in thee what she's looking for in life. We take a daughter of God and we treat her that way with the surrender prayer. One of the things we do in the surrender prayer is recognize her beauty. She is a daughter of our Heavenly Father. He created her. That's much different than saying, I can't look, I can't look, I can't look. We recognize in the world we're going to be in situations where there will be women that we're with that we find attractive. And at that moment, it's very important for us to begin to redirect our thinking with the surrender prayer. The next visual is 3 chairs. Most of the clients that I work with understand temptation. Often they can quote scriptures about temptation. They can refer to talks by the brethren on temptation. But how can we take temptation and teach it in a way that a client might understand? Some of my clients are adolescents, and so they have a background that's different than someone that's a returned missionary, for example. So what I like to do is show this visual with 3 chairs and say something like this. Let's suppose that Satan and his committee operates inside your head, and there's 3 committee members with Satan. And their job is to get you to go out and look at pornography. Now, it's a pretty hard, long jump to go from sacrament meeting on Sunday right to pornography. So Satan has to tempt us in pieces, if you will, or 1 committee member at a time. So let's think about the last time you lapsed, and think about what was going on that day and what events took place just prior to you looking at pornography. For example, what did the committee member say to you first in order to get you to the computer? Well, it was something like, why don't you go check your email? Because someone may have emailed something important. So, you agree with that committee member. You go to the computer to check your email, and there's no important emails. But now you're at the computer in front of the screen. And one of the emails was junk mail, sexually explicit material, and you said, what next? What did the next committee member say to you to get you to open the email? Well, it's usually something like, one more time won't make any difference now. Okay? So let's make a note of that. I have the clients write these down on Post-it notes, what the committee member says to them. I show the picture of the 3 chairs, and I want them to visualize putting a Post-it note on each of the 3 chairs. So on one Post-it note, it says, I need to check my email. On the next Post-it note, it says, one more time won't hurt. And finally, the third one is, it feels really good, so it's okay. And so I say to the client, it's very interesting how quickly you were able to come up with these 3 things. Did you notice that yourself? I asked you to come up with 3 ways Satan and his committee tempt you, and look at how quickly you were able to do that. Now, I suppose, client, if I had actually 10 chairs here, that we could continue this for another several minutes. What I'd like you to do this next week as an assignment is think about how the committee operates inside your head. You see, in order to go look at pornography, we eventually have to agree with the committee. That's right. We eventually have to agree with what the committee is telling us, and finally, at the 3rd committee member, the 5th committee member, or the 10th committee member, we finally agree. Now, it doesn't usually happen exactly like that because we want to debate the committee, don't we? Don't you do something like this? Why don't you go check your email? There might be something important. I can't go check my email because I don't want to get anywhere near the computer today. It's Sunday and I don't want to do anything like that. And so this debate goes on. What happens on the 2nd committee member? Is there a debate that goes on? Yes, there is. Something like, I'm not going to go because if I do, I might see an email, I might open it, it might be something sexually explicit, and I made a commitment to my wife, my bishop, I'm not going to do that anymore. Think about how much energy it takes to keep debating the committee. Do you find yourself using a lot of energy debating the committee? Most of my clients will say, yes, I do. Yeah, I would think so. Lots of energy. So finally, this turmoil starts going inside. Should I? Shouldn't I? It'll feel good, but I shouldn't do it. I know it's not right. I need a temple recommend, but it's going to feel good. And all of this going on inside until finally you say what? I'm going to do it. So I try to paint a visual picture for this client, and I try to take chairs to illustrate Satan and his committee and how they operate inside of our heads. So I say to the client something like this: is Satan and his committee paying you any rent? No. Have you thought about evicting them? Have you thought about forcing them out of your mind? Well, yeah, I've been working on this for nearly 20 years. I understand it must be very difficult at times. What if we replace a new committee? Have you ever sat down and watched the evening news or one of the 24-hour news stations where they have the anchor person, and then at the bottom of the screen they have what going on? Keywords or bulletins about what's going on in the world. Have you ever tried to do both at once? Have you ever tried to sit there and listen to the anchor person and at the same time read the headlines? What have you discovered? Well, doesn't work very well. That's right. Our mind can really only focus on one thing at a time. So what if you were to say to yourself, as soon as Satan and his committee makes the first proposal to go to the computer, what if you were to say this: I will choose not to listen to the committee, I will look to God and live. I will choose not to listen to the committee, I will look to God and live, until you can get to a safe place. What is a safe place? Maybe to talking with someone in your family, maybe making a phone call to a friend, maybe going outside and taking a quick walk, someplace until you can get to a place where it's safe for you. This statement, I will choose not to listen to the committee, is very important. I will is much different than I think I can. It's much different than I'll try. I will choose. I want the client to recapture his agency. I want him to realize that there are still choices, even though the light of addiction has taken over and to the point where the light within the spirit is gone and there's mostly darkness, that there is still hope. You still do have a choice. And it begins by recognizing how Satan and his committee customizes temptation for you. The next visual is a visual of a balloon, and then two balloons that are deflated. This visual can be used in many situations. Quite often I use it when I'm talking to the wife. She is very, very angry in many, many cases, and rightfully so. I let her know, I reassure her that you have every right to be angry. You have every right to be upset. And I understand that it must be very, very difficult to be in this situation. But what I'd like her to begin thinking is how she manages her anger. I want to validate that you have every right to be angry. There has been a violation of covenants. There has been a loss of trust. And there are many questions in your mind because of your husband's behavior. And so I use this balloon and I say to her, it's understandable that you have lots of anger. If we look at this balloon and we use it to symbolize your anger, what else do you see in the picture? And she'll say something like, well, I see two balloons that are deflated, no air in them. So here's what I'd like you to think about. Anger is okay. Anger is a human emotion. We have every right to be angry. What do we do with anger after we feel it, after we embrace it? Can we manage our anger differently than we are? And by doing so, how can that help us in the future? I want her to visualize a balloon. I want her to see in the grocery store when she sees balloons on sale, to maybe start thinking about anger. And then we would walk through several ways in which she might be able to manage her anger differently than she is at the present time. The next visual is a pair of binoculars. And this pair of binoculars is used in a couple of different situations. If I'm working just with a single man, then I have him look at the picture and say, have you ever used binoculars in your life, going to a sporting event or hunting or looking at the outdoors and so on? And quite often the answer is yes. What is it like when you take the binoculars and you turn them a little bit And so it creates two images. If you're looking at a deer, you can now see two deer. Now, if you pull the binoculars back slightly or adjust the lens, then you can see only one image. Quite often, when we're stuck in a compulsive behavior, we only see one image. The image is, I'm doing something bad, so I am bad. That image is not correct. That image is not healthy. That image is not Christ-like. If we take the binoculars and tilt them or adjust the lens, we can see two images. So what I'd like you to think about, client, is this. Here you are, on one hand, a son of God. Here you are, on the other hand, your behavior. Your behavior is inappropriate. As you said, your behavior is bad. That does not make you bad. It only makes your behavior bad. And there's a substantial difference between the two. The one is empowering. The one provides hope. The other does not. Many of these visuals can be used for other things besides treating clients who have compulsive sexual behaviors. I'm using the pronoun he because most of the men, most of the clients, I should say, who are addicted to pornography are men. There are some women. I don't intend to discount that at all during this presentation, but I am focusing on the area or the gender where the problem lies the most. The next one falls in place with the binocular, and that's this T chart or T table. When I'm working with my clients, I give the husband a notepad and I give the wife a notepad, and I ask them during the session, please take some notes. It's very interesting what happens at the end of the session when I say to them, I would like to make copies of your notes. And they say, oh, you can't read my writing. I said, I'm not too worried about the exact writing, but it helps me to remember what we talked about, and I can stick these notes in the file. One of the things I want to look at is this. When a statement was made during the counseling session, did the wife highlight it? Did she put an exclamation point at the end? Did she circle the word? And what did the husband do in his notes? I want to begin looking at the way they're taking notes to start seeing what is important to this wife, what is important to this husband, because it may answer questions in the very next session. So one of the things I would have the wife and husband do is draw this T table. On the left side, loved one, I would have them draw a stick figure, and in this case, it would represent the husband. On the right side, I would have the wife write down the loved one's behavior. What are some things about your husband's behavior that makes you very angry? Well, one, he looks at pornography. Okay? What are some other things? So we try to list them on the right side. On the left side, we only have the stick figure of her husband. I want her to start seeing that there is a difference between the husband and who he is, a son of God, and his behavior. It is very difficult for the wife, or anyone for that matter, to separate it. It's very easy as a third party looking in to separate it, but not when we're in the middle of the difficulty or in the middle of the pain. The next visual deals with a piece of cake. I show that to the client, and I ask the client to look at that and see how many different layers he can see in the cake. And then I ask a question like this. Where is the core of the cake? Where is the center? And I have him point in the picture. Now, pornography addiction is what you came in to meet with me about, how to get out of pornography addiction. one of the things I'd like you to think about is this. What is your core belief about pornography usage? Deep down inside, if we cut through all of the layers, what would we discover? Now, you know and I know what the church teaches. We can go to the Scriptures. We can read what's in the Scriptures. But what I'd like you to think about is this. What is your core belief deep down inside about pornography usage? Pornography is just the outside. It's just the frosting. Until we discover what's underneath all of that, it's going to be difficult. To set the stage for this picture, I usually do something like this. Do you mind, client, if I ask you a couple of personal questions? Go ahead. During your lifetime, have you ever been addicted to illegal drugs? No, I never have. Have you ever had a problem with the word of wisdom? Smoking, drinking, alcohol? No, never have. Why do you suppose that you have such a strong core belief when it comes to illegal drugs and alcohol, tobacco, and so on? Any idea why you might have such a strong belief? You came back so strongly about, no, I never have. Well, I don't know. My parents taught to me when I was quite young that you don't smoke, you don't drink. Interesting. You know, parents do have an impact. Research shows that children will adopt the viewpoints of their parents if they share it. So that makes sense. What happened in elementary school? Were there any drug awareness things going on when you were in school? Yeah, I remember a couple of programs. I remember the police coming a couple of times and talking about the ill effects of illegal drugs and so on. Interesting. What about priesthood lessons? What did your bishop say growing up about illegal drugs? So you've got a very strong belief about not using illegal drugs. What I'd like you to think about this week is do some more self-exploration. Think about why your belief is so strong in that one area. And then look at pornography and say, why is it not as strong? There could be some influences. We've talked about your childhood. Mom and Dad didn't say much, did they? No, they never did. I don't remember one time my parents saying anything about pornography and why we shouldn't use it. Okay? All we're trying to do is put some links here. We're not trying to cast blame. We're trying to put some links together. If we can link some of these things together, it will help you, client, to get rid of some of the shame that you carry, some of the embarrassment for this addiction. Shame causes us to go back to the addiction. It's when we realize that I am a son of God, my behavior has been bad, I can work and change my behavior. So I say to the client this, let me ask a few more questions before we conclude today's session. What does it say about you if you're looking at pornography? The client will pause and say something like, well, I guess it says I like seeing pictures of naked women. Okay? What does it say about you if you're looking at pictures of naked women? Well, I guess it says that I don't think it's that bad. I mean, it's not as bad as actually going out and having sex with a woman. Okay. Now, isn't that interesting? Your core belief is looking at pornography, pictures of naked women, is bad, but not that bad. As long as that is your core belief, we can do a lot of things here in counseling, But if that is your core belief, if we take the frosting off, if we took that first layer of cake off and we get right to the core, if that core belief doesn't change, it's going to be difficult to get out of the behavior. So I'd like to give you an assignment. This assignment is to read Alma chapter 39 through chapter 42. And I'd like you to read that and see what you discover. And see if that will help you to strengthen the core belief that looking at pictures of naked women is wrong. If you can move your core belief to that point, then that will help you in getting out of the behavior. The next visual is a picture of an exit sign on the interstate. And this exit sign is designed to help a client get through a lapse without beating himself up. There's all kinds of different levels of clients after a lapse. Some clients are very remorseful. Some, unfortunately, can be a little cocky, a little arrogant. Some blame it on their wives. There's a whole slew of reasons why and how they view a lapse. But I find that many active members of the church look at a lapse as I am a total failure. I am no good. I am unworthy. I don't have the right to pray. I'm not worthy enough to pray. I don't have the right to go to sacrament meeting. I'm not worthy to be in sacrament meeting. The shame, the embarrassment, and the guilt is very, very difficult for many clients to deal with. So I say to the client, to get to my office, you took the 90th South exit. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Let's just suppose here you live 20 miles away from my office about, and you inadvertently got thinking about something coming down the interstate and you missed the 90th South exit. What would you do? Well, I would take the 106th South exit. Okay, and then what? Well, I would turn around, get back on the interstate, come to 90th South, then take the 90th South exit. Come to your office. That makes total sense to me. I think that's a great plan. What if you handled a lapse the same way you handle taking a wrong exit on the interstate? See, you came in today and said you had lapsed, and that's fine. I appreciate that very much, but you are very depressed from what you said. You're very discouraged. You feel like you want to quit. You want to give up. You feel like your wife should divorce you. See, what you're saying in your mind is that now I've taken the wrong exit on the interstate. I need to turn around on 106, and I need to go all the way back 20 miles to where I started. Go inside my house, come out again, get in the car, start it, and then go down the interstate and take the right exit. Now, I understand it's not fun at all when we take the wrong exit, and it costs us a lot of time and energy and frustration and, yes, discouragement. But why are you demanding to drive all the way back home and start over? Why are you now saying, I had 2 weeks of sobriety and now I have none? This causes a lot of inner turmoil and discouragement. It makes total sense to turn around on the interstate and come to the correct exit and take it. You would not go all the way back home. So why are you demanding to go all the way back to beginning just because you've lapsed? Now, I don't talk this directly and maybe loudly as I am now when I'm with a client. I use a softer approach. I ask questions like, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? How you would treat taking the wrong exit and what you do when you take the wrong exit with your recovery. The next picture is a picture of a prescription bottle, and I say to the client, you've come in to get help from me. I hope I can help you. I can't promise that. I can tell you some things that have worked with other clients, and I hope that they will work with you. But ultimately, you need to be the one to take the prescription. I say to the wife, if you go to the doctors and there's some ailment that you have, and the doctor determines to prescribe an antibiotic, what's one of the things he says just before you leave his office regarding the antibiotic and how long you should take it? Well, he usually says something like this: take it until it's gone. That's exactly right. Is it possible after a couple of days of taking the antibiotic, you're feeling a lot better? Oh yeah, that happens quite often. That's generally the case. So the temptation is to do what? Not take the rest of the prescription. We have the same risk in counseling. You come for a couple of sessions, things seem to be coming together for you. A couple of the techniques that I've shared might be working for you. The temptation is to do what? Stop coming. I, like the medical doctor, encourage you to continue the prescription until it's gone. We continue to get help, treatment, to make sure that the addiction is gone. The next visual is a visual of a pasta strainer. And I use this to illustrate the power and importance of setting appropriate boundaries. Being able to say yes when it's appropriate and being able to say no when it's appropriate. If I have a wife that enjoys gardening, I say something like this: think about the times you go out to prune your apple tree or pear tree or peach tree or even your tomato vines. Why do you do that? Well, more sunlight can come in. It allows the remaining fruit to get larger. They get more nourishment. They're able to endure the heat of the summer, and we end up with a much better, juicier crop. Excellent. But in order to have that happen, someone had to cut something out. And that's you, the gardener. I would like you to look at your life and say, what can I cut out? Just like the fruit, you will become richer. You will become larger in your ability to deal with life. And you will have the nourishment you need from God the Eternal Father in order to deal with this very difficult trial that you did not ask for. The pasta strainer I use to say, if you were making some pasta, why do you use the strainer? Well, after the pasta's cooked, I throw it in here so the hot water can go out and the cold water can come in and cool the pasta. What would happen if you didn't use a pasta strainer and you just took the pan and dumped it in the sink? Well, pasta would go everywhere. And that's what happens with us emotionally. If we have not decided where we need to set boundaries, if we have not decided when to say yes and when to say no, our emotions go everywhere. And we have a huge emotional mess. And generally, at that moment, we say, I cannot do it another day. I've quit. I've had it. Boundaries are very important for the client, but quite often clients don't understand the importance of them, partly because we belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that teaches its members to perform service. And that's very important. But also, it's important to know when to say no. I cannot bake that cake for Friday night's ward social. I'm sorry. I cannot watch those children today. We need to know ourselves well enough to know, here I need to stop for this week and be able to say no. Each time we say no, we're saying yes to something else. And that might be what we need at that moment to change and to deal with our trials. The next visual is some pictures of pipe cleaners. How do you teach enmeshment to a client? How do you teach codependency to a client? What I use is this visual, 2 pipe cleaners, one blue and one orange. On the left side, I show the pipe cleaners woven together to the point that you cannot distinguish one color from the other. On the right side, you can still distinguish the 2 colors from one another. So I say to the wife and the husband as they're looking at this visual, what do you notice about the 2 pipe cleaners, the 2 sets of pipe cleaners? Well, the one, you can't tell any difference in the color. The other, you can clearly see. On the right side, we're talking about intimacy. On the left side, we're talking about codependency. Becoming one does not mean that the wife needs to stop being who she is, nor does it mean the husband needs to stop being who he is. We want each person to keep their goals, their dreams, their hopes, their aspirations, their personalities, their likes, their dislikes, together. That's what makes them what they are. And so we teach them emotional closeness. Emotional intimacy is becoming one, but not losing the individual characteristics and talents of each person. The next visual is a visual of 4 violins. If I have a client that's musically inclined, that plays a musical instrument, or that played a musical instrument somewhere in his lifetime, I want to relate my therapy to music. So part of my challenge is to say, what frame of reference does this client come from? I want to adapt the therapeutic approach. I want to adapt the clinician skills to my client. So I say, since you were in an orchestra back in high school, did some in college, did you ever go to a concert and see a professional musician, a violinist, or someone who was performing? Oh, yes. What would you have thought if something happened like this? You have a professional violinist that comes, you have a whole audience that's paid money to see this professional violinist, and the first number is beautiful, goes forward without a hitch. The second number, just a few notes into the number, the violinist makes an error. And he throws down the violin, he comes to the microphone and says, I am such a lousy violinist, I don't know why you guys paid to come and see me. I'm so terrible, I'm so rotten, I'm leaving. What would you think if you were in the audience and that actually happened? Well, I would think, what's he making such a big deal out of it? Just, you hit a wrong note, maybe someone didn't even notice, just keep playing and move on. Exactly. So why are you throwing down the violin and saying you want to quit, you don't want to try anymore, and you want to walk off the stage? You want to leave your family? Why not finish the rest of the song? Why not finish the rest of the concert? Why not appear at the next concert and the next concert? Yes, lapse is not good. Lapse is discouraging. But we learn from our mistakes. Next time we may not hit a wrong note on the second song, but we certainly limit our possibilities if we're not willing to show up at the concert. The next visual is a piano. So if I have a piano player, I use the same analogy, but now I tie it to the piano. The next visual is a stop sign. If I'm teaching the client about using some stop thought processes, then I want to show a picture of a stop sign. Next time you have a thought come into your mind, visualize a stop sign. Say the word stop to yourself. You might even consider spelling it out loud. S-T-O-P. Verbally say it out loud if you're alone, if you're traveling by yourself. And by doing so, it'll help to break up that thought, that inappropriate thought. The next one is a visual of a funnel. I like to get early on in treatment the client's sexual history. I want to know the first thing the client can remember about sexuality, whether it was appropriate or inappropriate, whether he was looking at pornography, a magazine he found somewhere, whether or not he was doing something innocently, where he was involved with a cousin or a brother or a neighbor. And it was something that's very common where a child says, "I'll show you yours if you'll show me mine." I want to know where it started and what took place from there. So I have some understanding of his drug of choice. I want to know more than just, I've been looking at pornography. I want to know, is it same-gender pornography? Is it heterosexual pornography? What types of pornography are you looking at within the heterosexual pornography realm? Because that can make a big difference on how I might choose to help him, and it also might help him to eliminate some of the shame he carries, since the addiction starts long before age 12 in most cases. It's been my experience that somewhere between age 8 and age 12, they are well into the addiction. So after getting from the client the sexual history, I have them look at the funnel, and I say, let's look at the tip of the funnel. That's where you first remember seeing some pornography. You were at a friend's house. You were 5 years old. An older brother had left pornography there, as you recall, and that's the beginning point, age 5. And now go down the funnel, and where would you rate yourself now as you look at that funnel? What I want them to visualize is this funnel is now going out, and where are they in their addiction? How far down the funnel are they? I want them to visualize the widening out of the funnel. The addiction takes more and more to produce the same adrenaline rush. And I want the client to visually see that. So one of the things I share with the client is what I call the Leo test. The Leo test is this. L is for how long have you been in the behavior? The first exposure was age 5. The client is now 24. So I'm looking at 19 years in the behavior. I understand there were some periods of time when there was no sobriety, perhaps during your mission, or when there was sobriety, perhaps during your mission. And that's fine, but we still have a 19-year history. The second one is O for how often. How often do you look at pornography? So that's the third letter, O. The second letter is E for explicit. How explicit is the pornography you look at? So I talk about the Leo test. How long have you been in the addiction? How explicit is the pornography you're looking at, and how often do you look at pornography? The next visual is a picture of a doorway with the word board. And the word board attached to the doorway is, I want the client to embrace some of these feelings that they don't feel that they should have. For example, being bored. Most of my clients find when they're bored, it's a trigger point to go act out, to go look at pornography. So I tape to the door the emotion that they are uncomfortable with and say, walk through the feeling of boredom. We all get bored at times. Learn to live with boredom. Learn to accept boredom. Learn to feel boredom and to walk through it. Life is not always exciting. Jobs are boring. Afternoons are boring. Cleaning houses are boring. And many, many more things. Part of life is to embrace boredom and say, I can be bored and still not act out. The next visual deals with a stack of books. And I use this to illustrate. We say things to ourselves that can make us more and more angry. For example, I might have anger with the first book emotionally. Something else happens. My husband acts out again. Now I have more anger. And later on, he says something rude to me or a sarcastic comment, and now I'm really angry. So our emotions build up over time just like a stack of books. So what we want to do is learn how to deal with the emotion early on before it gets out of control. The next visual is a picture of a wagon on the prairie, and the wagon is the picture. The frame around the picture is what I want the client to focus on. And then I show the next visual with a different frame. So we have two different frames. I use this to teach the client how do you reframe uncomfortable experiences, or how do you reframe what someone may have just said. So the reframing takes place when a client says to me something like this: "It's very difficult for me when I initiate sex with my wife and she is not interested. I find that I feel so rejected at that moment." Now, this is very common. So I try to help the client to see that it's okay to feel rejected. The fact is, your wife was not interested in having sex on Tuesday night, as you indicated. So you initiated sex, she said she wasn't interested. Now you feel terribly rejected. Let's separate the two. You said that you feel like your wife doesn't love you. Why? Because she didn't have sex with you. We have two things going on here. Number one, we have the fact and we have the perception. The fact is this: your wife chose not to have sex with you. Your perception is what? She doesn't love me. It's your perception that's creating a lot of emotional turmoil. How do you know that your wife doesn't love you? Just because she didn't have sex with you. Has she ever specifically said that? Well, no. Okay. So how could you find out if your perception is correct or not? Well, I guess I could ask her. But, she ought to be able to figure out that I like sex by now. Isn't that interesting? Is that a fact or is that a perception? You see, you want to be careful when someone says something or does something that you're not putting your own perception in with the fact. What if you did this next time? You initiate sex, your wife is not interested. It's her choice whether or not she's interested. What if you were to say something like this: "Sweetheart, can I talk right now?" "Sure. I feel very unloved. I feel rejected. I just tried to initiate sex and you were not interested. That makes me feel very unloved. It makes me feel rejected. I'm not saying this so we'll have sex right now. I'm not saying this to manipulate you in any way. But I'm saying this so I can be responsible for my feelings and emotions, because I know if I leave and I feel rejected, what it turns to. And I don't want to do pornography anymore. In the past, I have felt hurt, I have felt rejected, and those feelings are the fire that drives the pornography. I now am starting to see that. I tried so hard to stop pornography without ever dealing with my feelings. I now see the feelings are at the center. The pornography's the frosting. If I really want to change, I need to deal with my feelings and emotions differently than I do. And the surprising thing is, sometimes the wife didn't even realize that the husband was initiating sex, even though he thought he was. The next picture is a picture of two automobiles. I have the client look at it, and I say, "What do you see the difference is between the two automobiles?" I want the client to visualize and see that the second set of the car does not have any wheels. So as the client is looking at the picture, I'm talking about what do you see as the difference between those two pictures. The client can say, well, as you see, the second set of car doesn't have any wheels. And I say to the client, that's correct. There are no wheels on that second car. So does that make the car totally no good? Would you call a wrecking company and have them haul the car off? Would you call the Kidney Foundation and have them tow the car away and make a donation? And the answer is, no, I wouldn't. That's right. So why do you want to throw yourself away? It's true, there's some behavior we're trying to change. Attack the fact that you need new tires, but don't attack the car. Attack the fact that you need to change your behavior. We can attack pornography, we can attack the behavior, but be kind to yourself. Don't beat up on the car. Don't throw the car away. There's value. All we need to do is work to replace the tires. The final picture goes back to the 3 chairs again, and the 3 chairs can be used in a variety of different ways. Another way is to use the chairs and have the wife with Post-it notes identify what she says to herself about herself. The pornography addiction is so devastating to the wife. It's easier for her if she has a husband that's involved with alcohol or drugs or something of that nature, because she can separate and say, okay, that's his problem. He's an alcoholic. That's his problem. He's a drug addict, and it has nothing to do with me. But because sexuality is shared between a husband and wife, Satan does a lot to tear the wife down. She questions who she is. She questions her sexuality. She says things like, if I had been more sexually responsive, he would not have done this. If I had changed my attire, if I had been more flirtatious. All of these doubts come into her mind because of her husband's pornography usage. So I want her to identify how Satan tears her down, just like Satan tears her husband down. And I want her to say the same thing. I will choose not to listen to the committee. I will look to God and live. I'm grateful for this opportunity to do this presentation today. I know that God lives. I know that Jesus is the Christ. I know it's hard to change human behavior. I know it can be done as we work with our clients. We help them see the changes that they would choose to make, and they, like Nephi, say to themselves, I was led by the Spirit, not knowing beforehand the things which I should do. In the name of Jesus Christ the Lord, amen.